we think, it would be obvious that it's an addiction. If we ate, if we played golf, if we worked out as much and as frequently as we think, it would be very clear. It'd be like that person has an addiction to that thing.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Wedgie's podcast. Today we have a super interesting guest that I'm both super excited to talk to and also a little bit nervous to talk to, as we're going to be diving into the mental game of golf today with our good friend Spencer Montgomery. How you doing, man?
Great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Of course. Now, Caden, we were just talking about, obviously, Spencer, this is one of our first times really getting to talk with you deep in depth. You know, we've been kind of LinkedIn acquaintances up to this point. But through that, we've kind of able to see a little bit of your background and see a little bit of what you've done leading up to where you are now, working on the mental side of golf. I'd love to kind of take a deep dive into your background and kind of what led you to this point, you know, from being in the business world and all this kind of stuff towards wanting to focus on this interesting part of golf.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster and not a path I could have predicted. So starts off, let's go back to I'm 6 years old.
Wow. Okay.
We're going way back, way back.
Love it. Let's go.
I played my first competitive round of golf. Loved it. I won it. And
Can't
I
relate.
fell in love with golf. I mean, my dad started taking me when I was 3.
Mm.
We moved to Las Vegas. Las Vegas is a great place to play golf.
Yeah.
And so I just grew up playing golf, aspired to be a professional golfer, ended up playing a year at college. And it was there where golf became more of a job than a game. And I really burnt out. It was not what I wanted to do. And I just was like, I'm not good enough to become a professional golfer. And I think it would be a waste for my education if I just, focused on golf and didn't get the education I needed. So I ended up getting my degree in electrical engineering, which you don't do that if you are playing athletics.
Yeah.
And turns out I hated it also. But that really got me into the business world. Went and did software sales at a startup in San Francisco. After I graduated, that company grew from 100 people to 400 people, got acquired by Microsoft, worked at Microsoft for a time. Then while at Microsoft, super bored because it's a big company and not like a startup, I ended up finding blockchain and Bitcoin.
Wow.
Bought my first Bitcoin at $600, Ethereum at $12, turned $13,000 into $1 million within a year.
Wow.
So that was super crazy. Left Microsoft to start a hedge fund that failed before it got started. Ended up deciding to go get my MBA. Halfway through the MBA, got divorced, and so that kind of put another, roadblock in the whole career. That happened right before summer, between the first and second year, and you're supposed to go get an internship between your first and second year. Instead, I joined Riverside Country Club and golfed all summer. And
The right move.
The right move. It was amazing. The whole reason I went into my MBA was to buy a small business. I was like, I'd done the whole speculative thing with crypto, VC, that kind of stuff. I was like, I need something that has product market fit. That's just boring, going to generate cash flow. The divorce really disabled that, went down a different path for many years. Finally bought a small business about 8 months ago here in Utah, doing process serving. You know what that is?
Not at all.
Serving legal papers.
Okay.
Interesting.
You've been served.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you the one serving? Are you the one running out there and serving
Sometimes.
papers?
Yeah, I've
incredible.
got 3 to serve on my way back to the office.
Nice.
So that's super boring, right? But it's super consistent. I do 0 marketing, 0 sales, and every day, 30 to 50 jobs just come into our email.
Wow.
I've got 10 servers across the state. We serve really across the country. And that's what pays the bills. So I don't wake up and get super excited about serving papers on the daily.
Right.
But that allows me to now go chase my dreams. And my dreams is now to do coaching for golfers. So that's kind of how it's all played out.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, tons of different twists and turns throughout your career. I guess the question now is, what qualifications do you feel like you gained through those different
Mm.
experiences that allow you to be effective at what you do now?
Perfect. Okay. So, kind of told you, I've been playing competitive golf since I was
Mhm.
6. So, 30 years of golf experience. I
Yeah.
maintain a 0 handicap, and I know what it takes to play great golf.
Mhm.
Now,
Again, can't relate, but keep going.
with my career, I kind of hinted at it. Like, I've had my fair share of failures,
Mhm.
business failures, relationship failures. I know what rock bottom feels like. And through that, I've gotten a lot of coaching, life coaching, therapy. And I have now, like, I'm on the flip side of like my life is thriving 100%, that I know what it takes to go from 0 to thriving. And initially, I was just going to do life coaching,
Mhm.
helping people either that aren't making enough money or aren't in a good spot with relationships. And to be honest, like, because I didn't have a niche, people didn't know how I could help them.
Mhm.
Mm,
And I just woke up and realized, oh, my specialty is 30 years of golf. I know how to coach people if they want it to be in relationships or career or money or whatever. But what I'm really passionate about is golf. And so that's really where I've got 7 years of coaching training, 30 years of golf. That combined makes me, I think, the best, most suited for this.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, blending the two worlds and experiences that you know are uniquely able to have, and I think that's super awesome. And the next question I have is going, further into golf coaching and kind of the mental side from a high level perspective. What is your overall philosophy in coaching and in training your students?
It's that we're addicted to thinking.
Interesting. Please explain.
It's all a thinking
Huh.
problem. If we did anything as much as we think, it would be obvious that it's an addiction.
Okay.
If we ate, if we played golf, if we worked out as much and as frequently as we think, it would be very clear to be like that person has an addiction to that thing.
Mm.
But we're so unaware of how much we're thinking that we don't realize that it's an addiction. And the reason we think is because it's a fear response.
Mhm.
We're fearful that at some point in the future, we're not going to be okay. And so we have to think, meaning we have to plan and strategize in order to prevent that bad thing from happening in the future. That's why we think. And the reason we think and the reason we have fear is because we experienced something traumatizing in the past that we don't want to experience again. Now, when I say trauma, people get triggered and think that
Mhm.
it means like we saw somebody die or
Mhm.
we went through a divorce, like something major. And that's not that's not the trauma I'm talking about. I like to call it the lowercase t trauma.
Mm.
And it's an experience that we just never fully processed or that we feel guilt or shame around that we don't want to experience again. And golfers, it's really easy to identify that for them. Like when I am in coaching and I'm talking about like general life and I'm like, let's talk about a trauma. And they're like, I don't want to. That's too personal.
Yeah.
If I talk to you like, tell me a time that you like think back to a round of golf where you really choked or really underperformed, and that's where their trauma is. I've got so many of those.
Uh-huh.
And I realized like because I don't want to experience that again, I play small. Like the trauma I experienced at a high school golf tournament was enough. Why would I want to put myself out there and fail at a
Mhm.
bigger event like in college
Sure.
or even in a professional? So I'm going to play small enough so I don't get that successful to potentially fail even bigger.
Makes sense. So, what are some examples of these traumas that golfers experience?
Yeah. So I got a 2. In high school, I think I'm a sophomore. I'm typically shooting about 78.
Mhm.
And we had a home tournament on my home course that I play every single day.
Mhm.
And I shot 94.
Okay.
Completely
Yeah.
lost all sense of how to swing the club. And I remember having like all of these thoughts of like, my dad's going to be so disappointed in
Mhm.
me. I'm so embarrassed. I don't deserve to have these golf clubs that my parents paid for.
Yep.
Just feeling all of this guilt and shame for the performance that I had. And that has stuck with me.
Hmm.
Or another time where my parents paid for me to go and play in a tournament in Hawaii. And the practice round that we played great. The tournament comes, and I think I shot in the 90s both days. And
Mhm.
again, it's like, I don't deserve to be given all of these opportunities just to like fail miserably. And so it's then that guilt and shame that I have around those rounds because I never took the time to like process and forgive myself. That's what then sticks with me, and I continue to play small moving forward.
No, that's interesting. And I think it's really interesting to see how, like, when you have those previous experiences, how heavy they can relay on you. One of the other things that I wanted to ask you about is not just the trauma and the things you're about there, because I think those are really interesting. I actually just recently had a conversation. I got to play golf this last weekend with a buddy of mine who played in high school with. And we were kind of thinking back on our experiences playing high school golf. And it was interesting because he was competing for the state am every year in high school. Like, really good golfer, could play on that level. I was lucky to make the tournament. I was lucky to be in there. It was we were different levels of the spectrum. And I kind of talked about how I never got in my own brain that level of golf was even something I could attain. I never was able to break through the barrier mentally that, like, oh, under par is an option for you.
Yeah.
And I'd love to kind of get your perspective on why golfers, not just with the trauma and those kind of things, have that fear, but in my case, it was almost that fear led me to accept a lower level of golf.
Totally.
And not even push for what could have been possible.
Yeah, I like to call it the upper limit problem, where we have basically a limit as to how good we allow ourselves to feel, or how much success we allow ourselves to have. We have basically this baseline that is our normal of how we normally feel. And if we feel better than that, it's uncomfortable in that it's just unfamiliar. And then we'll self-sabotage ourselves to get back to that baseline that we're familiar with. Likewise, if bad things happen to us, that's, not normally how bad we feel, we'll then work ourselves and succeed to a point where we get back to that level of normal. And we see this with golfers. If they start off hot and they go birdie, 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 and that's better than they normally are performing, they'll self-sabotage and go bogey, 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 get back to par. Likewise, if a pro starts off triple bogey, then they will course correct and go birdie, 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 get back to that normal. And so it's just a habitual. It's just what we're used to feeling.
So an interesting question there then. So say I'm a golfer, I'm a bogey golfer. Okay. And this kind of going back to my high school experience, this is where I was a bogey golfer. I noticed a lot of times where it was like, okay, I want to get better. I want to play better. I want to be matching, my best buddy who's shooting 200 today. And so I would say kind of, trying to play mental games with myself, say, okay, bogeys aren't okay today. You're going par. Then I go bogey, 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 and now I'm frustrated. Now I'm upset, and I am going double, double, double because now I've dug a deeper hole. How do I then, what's the mental gymnastics I got to play to not only say, okay, I want to remove that upper limit problem, but also not do it in a way that's just going to make me angrier? Does that make sense?
Totally. I heard this quote just this week about what's the difference between the top 5 tennis players and the top 25 tennis players. And they said it's the thoughts that they have right before and right after the point. And that's the same thing with golfers. It's what are they thinking right before and right after the swing. And what happened when you have set the expectation of like, I'm going par, par, par this round, not bogey, bogey, bogey. When you then don't perform to the expectations, you then shame yourself for not meeting your expectations. You then are saying things like, oh, I'm so bad. How could you swing like that? How could you miss the shot? How could you duff it? How could you go into the bunker? That's all shaming language that then lowers, I like to call vibration, or basically the emotions and the feelings that you're having. And that just it's just a vicious cycle downward that's going to then cause you to go double bogey, double bogey, double bogey.
Right.
It's the thoughts that you're saying about yourself. And so if you have expectations and you're not meeting those expectations, and you're not forgiving yourself for the bad shot, you're not giving yourself grace for it, that's what's going to cause the downward spiral.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the flip side, because I actually experienced that just this last weekend. I I think 3 under through the first 4 holes,
Oh.
which was awesome, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Again, can't relate, guys. Come on.
can't say that that's how I normally start. And then, like you said, I think I ended up shooting 1 under.
Okay.
But I ended it with a couple bogeys, obviously. And it's kind of what you're saying earlier of like, I started out way better than I normally would, and then I self-sabotaged.
Yeah. Because you probably, I imagine you're getting closer to the end of the round. And you're like, what if I finish 3 under, 4 under?
Yeah, 100%.
Then what does that lead to? Oh, I get to tell people.
Yep.
And then it means something about you.
Yep.
If you can shoot 3 under, you let your golf game, your score mean something about you.
Yeah.
And that's why I felt so much shame and guilt when I shot the 94, because I let the 94 mean something about me. It's not just as a golfer, but as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we got to let it go. Our golf game means nothing about us.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of pride or shame in the number of your handicap.
Totally.
And that's something that I feel like I felt in, talking with friends and family, like for whatever reason, that number reflects who you are as a person and what your, capabilities are.
Listen, it's the same thing for our careers. How much we make, what our position, what our title is, how many kids we have, whatever. We all use these different things as a metric of like who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's getting to the point where you are totally comfortable with who you are, regardless of the outcomes or whatever the situation is going to allow you to play your best golf.
Okay, so let's go back to the course then.
Okay.
Having that in mind, what are some of these mental exercises or things that you can do real time to either prevent a self-sabotage or aid when you're not playing to your capabilities?
So the question is, how do you not think? Remember, that's the problem. You started thinking. So how do you not think? What's the opposite of thinking?
Not thinking.
Close. Close. It's feeling.
Okay.
Interesting. Explain that.
It's when you're thinking you're in the past or the future, when you're not thinking you're in the present moment. And what does it mean to be in the present moment? You are attuned to where your feet are, what your body's doing. And the only thing then that you can really be aware of is your senses. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? What are you touching? What are you feeling? What's happening in your body? And so that's really what you do when you're trying to prevent yourself from getting into thinking of like, get very present to what is happening right in front of you. What are you experiencing with the wind? How are you feeling tired? Are you feeling hungry? Are you having adrenaline? All of those things that like you get very present to what is happening with your physical sensations gets you out of your head. That's what I mean by feeling.
Interesting. Because when we first started talking, I had mentioned to you that I've been playing some of the best golf I have in recent years, and it's because of that singular thought of like, I got to stop thinking. And it really came from what Brooks Koepka talks about of like golf being a reactionary sport.
Yeah.
And how you need to be an athlete, right? And every shot and situation's different. And that's how I've tried to approach it. And it's silly because I talked to my brother and I talked to Dane and other people about like, what is it that I'm doing different? And it's literally like I try and have zero swing thoughts. And the last thing that I think about before I hit a shot is, it's kind of a silly phrase, but I literally think in my mind, aim small, miss small. And for whatever reason, it's been helping a ton.
Yeah.
And so the question is are there things like that you either do yourself or advise other people to do where they can in the moment focus on one thing?
Totally.
Because to say don't think is such a hard thing, right? Because your brain is doing so many things at one time.
It's like don't think about an elephant, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the best, I would say, just mental books out there is The Inner Game of Tennis.
Okay.
And they talk about how, people know how to swing a tennis racket and then they'll get out there and they completely choke. And the key that they say is just focus all of your attention on the ball. The ball going across the net, coming, bouncing, just fully focus. And I feel like that's similar to what I was saying earlier of like, that's just really concentrating on what your eyes are seeing. And if you're just focusing on what you're seeing, then it like clears your mind of like all of like the technique of the tennis swing. And so that's one thing you can do is just like really focus on the golf ball, focus on the grass stains, on the dimples as you're setting up to it. or the target. It's like golf ball target.
Mhm.
You focus on the flag. You just focus. You're not thinking, don't go left into the bunker. It's just the green, the flag,
Yeah.
whatever it is. To be very specific. And that's what you'll find for most amateur golfers is they're just unaware of where their mind is at when they step over the ball. They're not aware that they're thinking about home or work or the pass shot or what they could potentially be shooting if they keep this up. They just aren't aware that they're not present of what is happening right now as they're stepping over that swing.
We've noticed this really heavily because with our business, a lot of what we do is networking golf. That's a very consistent thing for us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so when we do this, when we go to the round, the goal is not golf. The goal is chat up whoever we're trying to impress, talk to this person, try and do this. And so I remember a little bit ago, we went and played around with a potential client, and Caden was in the cart with the person we were networking with, and I was off in my own cart playing golf.
You
and
put the good golfer with the client.
Exactly.
I got it.
And so surprisingly, like I was playing much better golf than Caden that day, which doesn't usually happen. And then it was like halfway through the round, Caden turns and he's like, I gotta stop networking and I gotta start like playing golf.
Okay.
And then like all of a sudden he was back.
I just couldn't do both.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a similar thing.
I
we were
actually
saying
thought
there.
it was this. I was expecting to hear the opposite
Really?
because his mind is on the networking. He doesn't have to
Think so much.
think about so much about the golf game.
And I think it goes back to what we were talking earlier of just like the metrics or the things that you use to measure yourself against. And, you know, coming into that round, whether it was subconscious or not, like I just came in thinking like, oh, I'm one of the better golfers here, so I should
Yeah,
impress.
And
you
I
know?
guess what I should have. There's a difference between being focused,
Yeah.
and not thinking.
Mm.
And so the reason you weren't playing is because you weren't focused. You may not be thinking, but you also weren't focused.
Yeah.
And so how can you be focused and not think?
Well, that's what I'm wondering is it's almost like he wasn't focused because he was thinking. He might have been not thinking about golf, but he was like, oh, so-and-so just said this one thing about his past work experience. How do I turn that into a cool thing about what we could do for
Yeah,
him?
and
it's
so
like,
he still wasn't present on the golf course.
exactly. He still was thinking pretty heavily. And again, we use that as an example, but that happens to us so very often, especially when we do rounds where like, oh, I'm trying to take photography during the round. You know, I'm trying to do client work during our round.
That is I'm glad you brought that up because I would love to be a golf influencer, right? Have all
Mhm.
these golf videos on TikTok and everything, but I get so distracted
Mm-hmm.
from my golf game when I'm trying to take all these videos. I'm like, so I never take videos.
Mhm.
So I can never be an influencer because I care more about being in the moment, being present with my golf game.
Yeah, we actually just this last weekend got to go play out with Joe Canfield, a mutual connection of ours. And while we were playing, I had brought my camera and a couple of pieces from a client, and I was like, oh, I'll shoot. And it was funny. I actually ended up forgetting an SD card.
Okay.
And I remember getting in the first tee box, realizing I'd forgotten an SD card. I went, good, I can play good golf today. And I like put my camera away because I knew if I try and do both, it's going to be a different thing.
He's going to use that excuse every time.
Every time. Don't you worry. I've always got a camera, so it's always an excuse. One of the other questions that I wanted to ask you was really just kind of when you're going into this, you know, obviously you don't get to be out there with your clients. You know,
Yes,
you don't get a,
but that's the goal.
yeah, definitely. But, you know, you don't get to hold hands every
Totally.
single round, and you're also not in the head
Mhm.
of the clients, even if you are with them. What are kind of the, I don't know, we call them swing thoughts, you know, in swing training and stuff like that. But what are the swing thoughts or the not thoughts or whatever it is that you're trying to provide to a client so that they can be able to remember how to focus on themselves or how to not focus on themselves or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I would say the first part is just to bring awareness to what they're thinking.
Hmm.
Before we can give them like what to do, like the action steps of like you should be doing this, we have to first have them bring awareness to the thoughts that they're having. And so one activity that I have my clients do is like right before they swing, give themselves a number between 1 and 5 as to how confident they are that this is going to be a good shot. A 5 meaning they are fully confident that it's going to be great. 1 being 0 confidence. 3 is like, it could go either way,
Mhm.
right? And so then having that, basically that scorecard of the confidence score will give them awareness to how confident they are before each swing. Once we have that, then we can talk about what to do, of like not
Interesting.
thinking and that kind of stuff.
I'd love kind of what you're saying here. You're kind of giving these skill levels, this confidence level thing. There's a potential opportunity I have this week. Actually, tomorrow. I'm hopping on a plane tomorrow. I'm going to a big event full of golf influencers, all these different people who are both, impressive people that I want to impress, all this kind of stuff, interesting golfers. If you were to coach someone like me walking into that thing, I think it'd be kind of a cool, is like, here's a real life example.
Yeah.
What would be the thing where it's like, okay, you're going into this thing where your swing might be on display or whatever that might look like. What are the nuggets or things that like I in that experience should put into my head?
All right, you're being very, really vulnerable here.
Very vulnerable. I'm willing to do it.
What are you making this event mean?
For me, in my mind, I am the displaying of Wedge, of our company. Okay. I'm kind of the front-facing person for what Wedge is going to be. Most people there won't know who we are, so it's kind of the introduction to who we are at that moment.
And how important is this meeting?
I don't know, to be honest. From what I understand, most of the people there aren't direct, like, I don't think any of them are sign up as clients necessarily, but they are people who are well connected or like people that we would want to have
so
know
how
in
much
the industry.
pressure are you putting on yourself to like make this successful?
I've been thinking about it a lot to try and not put pressure on it as a way of trying to like build it down.
Yeah. Because pressure doesn't exist.
Okay.
Only thoughts, pressure thoughts is what exist.
Okay. Interesting.
It's like stress doesn't exist. It's the thoughts,
like
stressful thoughts.
The idea of like I'm feeling someone's eyes on me, whether they're on them or not.
Think about a putt that is 3 feet. It's a straight putt, and it's to win the championship.
Okay.
The only thing that's different between the 3-foot putt with your friends versus the championship is the meaning that we make about the 3-foot putt. If I make the putt, I win the championship. If I win the championship, I'm amazing. If I'm amazing, people will love me and I'll make more money and all this thing. Versus with your buddies, it's just a 3-foot putt. There's no meaning to it. If I make the putt, great. If I don't, there's no consequence. And so we're thinking that by putting pressure on it, that we're going to perform better.
Interesting.
By making it mean more, that it will cause us to perform better. Okay.
See, now that you mentioned that, it actually brings into my mind, in my historical, if I look back on when I played my best rounds of golf, some people I know, like the pressure is what pushes them forward when they're saying like, oh, I got to perform.
Thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. The pressure thoughts or like the hard moments or whatever it might be, that's what pushes them forward and makes like, oh, I got to rise to the moment. For me, I play my best golf when I'm like playing with my buddies who don't play.
Exactly.
And they turn to me and they're like, oh, you're the best golfer in the world.
Right.
Knowing I'm not, but it's like, I feel their confidence is what gives me confidence instead of trying to rise to then, oh, I got to beat the group or whatever.
People that pressure makes them perform better, they're in the 1%. That's the Tiger Woods. I'm not working with those. It's the rest of us, our normal people, where the pressure actually is a negative thing for our games. And so that's what I'm talking to you about. This is like, don't let it mean anything.
Interesting.
It's not the success or the failure of this event means nothing about you or your business. And just go there to just experience it. It doesn't mean anything. And as you don't put that pressure on, you're going to show up as your best self.
Interesting.
And then the best outcomes will come by you showing up as your most authentic, unique self.
That's awesome. I think we'll have to do a follow-up pod after, and I'll have to
100%.
report how well I put pressure or did not put pressure on myself. That's interesting.
I had one other question, and it may or may not open up another tangent, but I'm really curious because we also talked before the pod about Wyndham Clark.
Okay.
And about how, for a long time he was struggling, missing cuts, dealing with some emotions and things, and then he found this mental coach. Shoots up. He was, what was he? What was the big win he had?
The U.S. Open.
U.S. Open.
Last year.
Yeah, and then won a few other ones. And now he's tapered off, it seems. What do you feel like has changed, if at all?
Between which one? Between
his
the
rise,
victory?
So I guess both changes. Because it was the rise to victory, and then he was like the top dog, and now it seems like he's struggling again.
Yeah, I mean,
but he has the mental
struggling
coach.
Now is relative. Like his struggle now is still far better than before he won the U.S. Open. So as I watched on Full Swing, they
Mhm.
they kind of document Wyndham Clark's working with a life coach or a
Yep.
therapist or
Mhm.
whatever, psychologist. Um, it you could he dealt with the loss of his mom, I think,
Yeah.
and so there's a lot of trauma, I'm
Mhm.
sure, with that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And so, as you hear, he was a hothead. He
Mhm.
was just super negative about himself. He put expectations, and then when he wouldn't meet those expectations, he would, shame, guilt
Mhm.
himself for not performing, and then it was just this negative spiral. And so it sounded like the psychologist helped him work through that, where when he hit a bad shot, it didn't mean anything. He could move on and hit the next shot. And that allowed him to win the US Open. Well, now when he won the US Open, he's got new expectations
Right.
that he's got to work through.
Mm.
Which is
It
that
kinda
3
goes
foot
back
putt.
to this,
Yeah, it made me think of that.
and it also goes back to the upper limit problem,
Mhm.
where the victory of the US Open was a new level of success that he wasn't familiar with, and so he's now having to get more familiar with being successful on a more consistent basis. Who's the other guy that they profiled in that? That was
Joel Damon.
Joel Damon.
Yeah.
Such a fun guy.
Yeah.
To watch, and he's really struggling.
Mhm.
And it sounds like he's got the same issues, but he's being very resistant to working
To
with
help,
us.
yeah.
And it's because doing the work where you really kind of uncover the trauma and the negative thoughts, it's scary. It's
hard.
scary to go and kind of dig into your subconscious. But that's exactly the same thing. Joel Damon is so hard on himself that he doesn't forgive himself. It literally, that's all of my coaching is uncovering where you're not forgiving yourself. You're not being kind to yourself. I have my whole, if you could summarize my outset on life,
Mhm.
is your life is a mirror to how you view and think about yourself. And it's the same thing with your golf game. And I'm not saying that a scratch golfer thinks about himself better than a bogey golfer, because the scratch golfer just practice more.
Mhm.
But the gap between what your potential is and what you're normally shooting, the higher that gap is, the more you don't like yourself.
Mm.
When you're performing up to your potential, it's because you think positively about yourself.
Mhm.
And so if positive thinking is not going to just magically convert you
Right.
to a 15 handicap to a 1 handicap.
Mhm.
What I'm trying to help people is, if they are a 5 handicap, but they know because they have played to a 1 handicap before, and they just are getting in their own way, that's what I'm helping
Right.
eliminate. They still got to do the practice. They got to still
Yeah.
put in the range time.
Which I like that you explain that, because, hopefully people don't misconstrue the idea that, like, oh, I'm not a great technical or physical golfer, and all I need to do is focus on the mental side and become Tiger Woods. But it's those small margins that, you can make these adjustments and either get back to where you were or get back to where you could be.
Yeah. The other thing is, I really want to help golfers that have experienced what I felt, where golf became not a game, but a job,
Mm-hmm.
where they just lost the joy of it.
Yeah.
I want to help people get out of that.
Mhm.
Because golf is a game. It should be fun. It should be something that benefits your life. If you play golf and you are in a worse mood after playing, you're missing the mark.
Yeah.
And if especially high school players, college players, if their golf game is causing them more strife than joy, that's where I feel like I can help.
Well, that's incredible. I think that's really something that I know, like, in my own life and my own golf game. Like, it's so funny because golf, we always talk about golf being like a reflection of life
It
You know,
is totally.
in a lot of different ways. And, that's why you talk about people, when you step up to the tee, there's so many thoughts that could be going on, not just in the golf game, but in the rest of this. I guess my kind of final question is just, how have you seen people who are improving in that golf aspect? Does that also help improve mentality beyond golf and beyond that, and actually have an impact on their life?
So I'm glad you asked. That's like, because what I'm hoping is that as people hear how all of this works on their golf game, they'll realize that it perfectly blends into their everyday life.
Mhm.
Just like we overthink on our golf game, we overthink in real life. Just like we experience trauma on the golf course, we experience trauma in real life. Every time, just like we need to be present in the moment on the golf course, we need to be present and in the moment in real life. It's like directly. It's almost like, golf is the metaphor for them to like realize like, oh, if this works here, I wonder how it could also work in my business life, in my relationships, in my just overall life. Because I have seen and I've applied it and I've gone from, losing my job, renting in, a town where I don't have many friends, driving a 20-year-old car, like all of the things that on paper look like life sucks, and it did suck, to 18 months later, I'm living the dream life.
Mm.
And it's the only thing that shifted was my mindset and my belief about who I am. I've forgiven myself, and the more I think positively about me, life is just really working out. And so I don't claim to know anything. I just know what's worked for me, and I would love for people to see if it'll work for them. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. I don't claim to know anything. I just know what's worked for me.
That's incredible. And I think I would recommend, to everybody to not only try and internalize what we've talked about today and to try and use that as a way to get better, but also to reach out to you. Like we mentioned and we talked about before, you are offering both one-on-one coaching, but also, group coaching and all that kind of different stuff. I'd love for you to take an opportunity to kind of talk about how people can get the chance to work with you.
Yeah. So the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn for now. That's where I've built the biggest presence. And just send me a DM or send me an email and I'll give you my contact information. But yeah, I work with people one-on-one directly. We can even work over Zoom or on the golf course. I just want to play more golf. So.
Hey, love it. Don't we all?
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time today and being able to talk. And like we said, we'll probably do a follow-up one and talk and get to know each other more.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me,
Spencer.
No problem.